I had less than a minute before his smile became a death sentence. The room was glowing with money, crystal glasses, candlelight, silk dresses brushing leather booths, but my hands were cold. Not shaking. Locked. The kind of stillness that comes when your body knows something irreversible is about to happen. He was laughing when I stepped closer. Korean Mafia boss. Untouchable. Relaxed. Smiling like nothing in the world could reach him. I leaned in to refill his glass, close enough to smell his cologne, close enough that anyone watching would think I was flirting, or begging for a tip. Instead, I whispered 4 words. They were small. Quiet. Almost nothing. But the instant they left my mouth, his smile vanished. Not slowly. Not with confusion. It dropped like a switch had been flipped. And that's when I knew. Whatever I'd just done. There was no walking away from it. The Gilded Lotus didn't feel like a restaurant. It felt like a vault where money went to feel important. Everything inside was polished to the point of intimidation. Marble floors that reflected the light like water. Gold-trimmed walls softened by shadow. Chandeliers hanging low enough to remind you they were expensive, but not low enough to touch. Even the air felt curated, warm, perfumed, heavy with truffle oil and imported wine. This was the kind of place where voices never rose above a murmur, not because people were polite, but because they were powerful enough not to need volume. I moved through it like I didn't belong. Because I didn't. My uniform was clean, pressed, forgettable by design. Black slacks. White shirt. Apron tied tight at the waist. Shoes polished just enough to pass inspection, but cheap enough to squeak faintly against the marble if you listened too closely. Most people didn't. They were too busy discussing hedge funds, divorces, summer homes in places I'd never been and couldn't pronounce correctly. The kind of conversations where numbers were tossed around casually, 6 figures, 7 figures, like they were talking about grocery lists. I carried plates worth more than my monthly rent and smiled like it didn't matter. That was the job. Table numbers floated in my head like coordinates. 7 wanted another bottle. 12 needed extra napkins. 3 was ready for dessert. I moved on muscle memory, on training, on repetition. But my eyes kept drifting back to table 1. It sat in the corner, half-circle booth, back to the glass wall. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the Chicago skyline like a private painting. City lights glittered behind the man seated there, turning him into a silhouette carved out of power. Kang Min-jun. You didn't need to be told who he was. The room already knew. People didn't stare outright, but glances bent in his direction like metal drawn to a magnet. Conversation softened when he laughed. Chairs scraped quieter when servers passed his table. Even the jazz trio in the corner seemed to play just a little slower, a little smoother, like they understood the hierarchy without being told. He wore a dark suit that fit too well to be flashy. No loud patterns. No unnecessary shine. Just clean lines, sharp tailoring, and the kind of confidence that came from knowing nothing in this room could touch him unless he allowed it. He smiled easily. Warm. Relaxed. The kind of smile that made people forget teeth could be weapons. Across from him sat Carolina Costa. If Kang Min-jun was quiet power, Carolina was spectacle. Her dress clung like it had been designed specifically for her body, pale against her skin, elegant without trying. Diamond earrings caught the candlelight every time she moved, scattering tiny flashes across the tablecloth. Her hair was swept back perfectly, not a strand out of place, her makeup flawless in a way that suggested professionals, not mirrors. She leaned in close when she spoke to him. Touched his wrist when she laughed. The picture of intimacy. The picture of devotion. The kind of couple magazines loved. I'd seen their faces before. Everyone had. Society pages. Business features. Engagement announcements framed as fairy tales. Korean businessman meets Italian heiress. Global power. Modern royalty. Love, according to the headlines. I brought them water once, earlier in the evening. Crystal glasses, filled precisely to the same line. They hadn't noticed me. Or maybe they had and simply chose not to acknowledge that I existed. Both were worse. As I moved past their table now, carrying a tray toward the bar, something tightened in my chest. Not fear. Not yet. Unease. The kind that doesn't have a name when it first arrives. Carolina laughed at something Kang Min-jun said. It was light. Musical. Perfectly timed. But it didn't reach her eyes. Not fully. There was a sharpness there, just beneath the surface, like glass polished smooth enough to cut without warning. I looked away, annoyed with myself. This was a restaurant. Not a movie. Rich people laughed differently. Loved differently. Everything about them was amplified, exaggerated. That didn't mean it was dangerous. Still, my gaze flicked to the bar. One man sat there alone. Mid-30s, maybe. Dark suit. Clean haircut. A glass of scotch in front of him that had barely been touched. He'd been nursing it for at least 20 minutes, lifting it occasionally, setting it back down without drinking. His eyes weren't on the TV mounted above the bar. They weren't scanning the room casually, either. They were fixed on table 1. I told myself it was coincidence. Then I noticed the men near the kitchen entrance. 3 of them. Standing too close together to be waiting for tables. Menus open in their hands, but no server had approached them, and they hadn't tried to flag anyone down. 2 had their backs to the wall. The third kept adjusting his jacket. One hand never fully leaving the inside pocket. My steps slowed. I hated that my brain was cataloging details. I hated that once I'd noticed them, I couldn't stop. I passed the kitchen doors, the smell of butter and garlic washing over me, and caught a fragment of conversation from table 1 as I moved by again. Nothing specific. Just tone. Carolina's voice dipped lower. Kang Min-jun responded quietly. Their heads bent toward each other, intimate, conspiratorial. A normal couple. Except the air around them felt compressed. Like the moment before a thunderclap. I delivered dessert to table 12 and forced myself to smile wider than necessary. My reflection in the polished silverware looked normal. Calm. Professional. But my heart wasn't matching my face. I checked the clock mounted above the service station. Time ticked forward with no urgency at all. The restaurant flowed around me, unbothered. Laughter. Clinking glasses. Soft jazz curling through the air like smoke. And yet, something was wrong. I felt it when I turned back toward the bar and saw the man with the scotch shift his stool, angling his body slightly, adjusting his line of sight. I felt it when one of the men near the kitchen murmured something under his breath and the others nodded, subtle, synchronized. I felt it when Carolina reached across the table and placed her hand over Kang Min-jun's, her smile widening just a fraction too much, like she was performing rather than reacting. My tray felt heavier. I stopped near the service station, pretending to check orders while my eyes traced the room again, slower this time. Patterns emerged. Positions. Sightlines. Table 1 by the glass. The bar. The kitchen. My stomach dropped. And that's when the first real disturbance hit, not loud, not obvious, but unmistakable. The man at the bar stood up. Not abruptly. Not suspiciously. Just enough to make space. And every instinct in my body screamed at the same time. Something had just shifted. I told myself to breathe. Slow. Quiet. Invisible. Whatever I thought I was seeing, whatever pattern my mind was stitching together, it couldn't be real. This was a restaurant. An expensive one, yes, but still a place built on illusion. On pretending nothing bad ever happened inside rooms like this. I lifted another tray and moved toward the wine cellar stairs, grateful for the excuse to step away from the floor. The cellar was tucked beneath the restaurant like a secret. Glass walls. Soft lighting. Bottles displayed like artifacts behind museum panels. The temperature dropped the second I stepped inside, the air cool and dry against my skin. I reached for a burrolo from the middle rack. And froze. Voices. Female. Low. Sharp around the edges. They weren't speaking English. I stayed still, my fingers resting against the neck of the bottle, my body half hidden by a column of stacked vintages. The sound carried easily in the enclosed space, echoing faintly off glass and stone. Italian. I wasn't fluent. Not even close. But restaurant work teaches you things whether you want to learn them or not. Menus. Orders. Numbers. Directions. And some words don't need translation. Uno. Vetro. Tavolo. 1. Glass. Table. My heart stuttered. I leaned back slightly, careful not to let my shoes scuff the floor. The voices drifted closer to the stairs, still unaware of me. He's already seated, one woman said. By the glass. Table 1. A second voice responded, quieter, more amused. Good. He likes the view. They laughed softly. I didn't. The first woman continued, her tone shifting, less casual now, more deliberate. 1 at the bar. 3 near the kitchen. They're already in position. Position. That word landed heavy. My grip tightened on the bottle. For a split second, I considered announcing myself. Clearing my throat. Letting them know I was there so this would stop feeling like something I wasn't meant to hear. Instead, I pressed myself deeper into the shadows between racks. The voices paused. Then something changed. The woman switched languages. Not Italian. Russian. Fast. Hard. Consonants snapping like knuckles. I couldn't understand the words, but the cadence told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't casual conversation. This wasn't gossip. It was confirmation. A countdown disguised as dialogue. I felt the cold then. Really felt it. The cellar might have been climate controlled, but my skin prickled like I'd stepped outside into winter without a coat. You'll have a clean shot, the woman said, switching back to Italian. As soon as he settles. Clean shot. My breath caught in my throat. Footsteps approached the stairs. Heels clicking with confidence, unhurried. I flattened myself against the rack, heart pounding so loud I was sure it would give me away. Through the glass and bottles, I saw her. Tall. Elegant. White dress. Diamond earrings. Carolina Costa. She moved like she owned the building. Like nothing in the world could interrupt her trajectory. As she passed, her perfume lingered, expensive, floral, suffocating. The scent of a celebration. Or a funeral. She disappeared up the stairs without a backward glance. I stayed where I was long after the cellar fell silent. 10 seconds. 15. My legs felt detached from my body, like they belonged to someone else. When I finally moved, the bottle slipped slightly in my hand. I caught it just in time, the soft clink echoing louder than it should have. I didn't retrieve the wine. I climbed the stairs empty-handed, my mind racing faster than my feet. Table 1. By the glass. 1 at the bar. 3 near the kitchen. I stepped back onto the restaurant floor, and the illusion shattered. Everything I'd dismissed earlier snapped into alignment. The man at the bar, still watching table 1. The 3 men near the kitchen, still loitering, still tense. Carolina, already back in her seat, laughing, leaning close, playing her role perfectly. Kang Min-jun sat across from her, smiling. Unaware. Or so it seemed. I moved through the room on autopilot, tray pressed against my chest like armor. My eyes scanned without permission now, mapping the space in sharp, efficient lines. The bar. Clear line of sight to the corner booth. The kitchen doors. Direct access. Easy exit. Easy ambush. No one else noticed. Or if they did, they didn't care. Conversations flowed. Glasses clinked. A server laughed too loudly near the service station. Normalcy pressed in from all sides. My pulse hammered. I passed table 1 again, close enough to hear their voices. Carolina was speaking softly, her hand resting on Kang Min-jun's wrist. He nodded, smiling, relaxed. Comfortable. Too comfortable. I watched his smile with new eyes. It wasn't ignorant. It wasn't foolish. It was temporary. Like a man enjoying the last seconds of warmth before stepping into the cold. Fear crawled up my spine, sharp and electric. I knew with a certainty that made my stomach drop. That smile wasn't just ease. It was the last safe moment he had left. And once it disappeared, everything in this room was going to change. I had a choice. That realization didn't come gently. It hit me like a physical thing, sharp, sudden, unavoidable. I could walk away. Finish my shift. Keep my head down. Let whatever was forming finish forming without my fingerprints on it. People like me survived by not inserting ourselves into stories that didn't belong to us. I knew that rule. I'd lived by it. But knowing a rule and believing in it were two different things. I stood near the service station, pretending to polish a glass that was already clean, my eyes flicking back to table 1 again and again. Kang Min-jun was laughing now. Something Carolina had said amused him enough to throw his head back slightly. Relaxed. Exposed. The man at the bar shifted his weight. Just a little. My chest tightened. I thought of my brother. The memory came uninvited, like it always did when I stood at the edge of a decision. He'd been younger than me. Louder. Always convinced the world would give him more time than it actually does. They told us it was wrong place, wrong time. They always say that. But I remembered the part they didn't put in the reports, the way someone had seen something earlier and said nothing. Because it wasn't their business. Because getting involved felt dangerous. Because silence felt safer. That silence had a body count. My hand started to shake. I lowered the glass and set it down before anyone noticed. Walk away, I told myself. This isn't your fight. You don't know enough. But that was the lie people tell themselves when knowing too much becomes inconvenient. I did know enough. I knew there were people positioned around the room like furniture. I knew languages had shifted when plans became serious. I knew Carolina's laughter was too precise, too measured, like she was hitting marks only she could see. And I knew something else, something colder. If I walked away now, I'd hear the sound later. A crack. A scream. Glass shattering. And I'd carry it with me forever. My eyes found Kang Min-jun again. His smile hadn't faded yet. I had maybe seconds before it did. My breath shortened. Think. Calling the police would take too long. Creating a scene would escalate things immediately. Running wouldn't save anyone. Not in a room already mapped for violence. There was only one option left. warning him. Not loudly. Not visibly. A whisper. Something small enough not to trigger panic. Sharp enough to cut through the illusion. Dangerous enough to change the board. My stomach twisted. I'd never spoken to him directly before. Never crossed that invisible line between service and presence. Waitresses weren't supposed to exist beyond plates and smiles. But this wouldn't be service. This would be interference. The clock started ticking in my head. 10 seconds. The man at the bar lifted his glass but didn't drink. 8 seconds. Carolina leaned closer, her voice low, intimate. 6 seconds. My feet moved before my fear could stop them. I picked up a tray, empty, light, an excuse, and stepped out from behind the service station. Each step toward table 1 felt heavier than the last, like gravity had decided to argue with me personally. 4 seconds. The lights seemed brighter near the table. Or maybe my senses were just sharpening, every detail carving itself into memory. The cut of Kang Min-jun's suit. The faint scar near his jaw. The way his eyes softened when Carolina touched his hand. 3 seconds. I stopped at the edge of the table. "Excuse me," I said, my voice steady enough to surprise myself. "May I clear this?" Carolina looked up at me. Her eyes were calm. Too calm. They flicked to my face, then down to my hands, then back to my eyes. In that brief scan, something passed between us, recognition, maybe. Or warning. Kang Min-jun turned toward me. He smiled. That smile. The last safe moment. 2 seconds. I leaned closer, lowering my head as if to reach for the plate, my shoulder angling toward him in a way that looked natural to anyone watching. 1 second. My mouth moved toward his ear. And in that instant, right before the words, I understood something with terrifying clarity. Once I crossed this line, there was no version of this night where I went back to being invisible. I leaned in anyway, the words left my lips before I could second-guess myself. 4 small words. Whispered. Light as a brush of silk against skin. The world didn't react. At least, not outwardly. Kang Min-jun froze mid-laugh. His head tilted slightly, just enough that anyone glancing from the corner would assume it was curiosity, not recognition. But the smile, the one that had been warm, easy, untouchable, faltered. Not dramatically. Not in a cartoonish way. Just the tiniest twitch at the corner of his mouth, a shadow passing where amusement had been. I could feel it. A shiver running down my spine in answer to the subtle shift in the air. Carolina's hand stayed pressed against his, but her fingers tightened imperceptibly. Her laugh paused mid-note, caught somewhere between genuine and performance. The rest of the restaurant didn't notice a thing. Conversations continued. Cutlery scraped plates. Glasses rang softly. Jazz riffed through the background, slow and smooth, oblivious. The illusion of normalcy was perfect. And it made the tension worse. I stepped back slightly, pretending to adjust a napkin, all the while watching him process in silence. His eyes darkened. Not cold, calculated. Observing. Measuring. Time slowed. The faintest crease appeared between his brows. A small inhale. His fingers drummed once against the crystal glass, deliberately. Methodically. And then, nothing. A calm that was more dangerous than rage. I wanted to see his reaction spread across the table. Wanted to catch the moment his lips betrayed recognition. But he offered nothing. Just stillness. Absolute. Controlled. Carolina tilted her head toward him, searching. Her smile was steady now, but her eyes flickered once, and I caught it. She knew. The tension between them wasn't new. It was hidden, layered. A quiet war masked by elegance. By the act of being seen in public. I wanted to breathe. I wanted to tell myself it was enough. That the words had done their job, and somehow, invisibly, I'd nudged the scales. But I couldn't. Because he moved next. Slow. Minimal. Every gesture precise. He lifted a hand, not to her, not to me, not to anyone. Just a small motion, subtle enough that the casual observer would never notice. But in that gesture, the room shifted. Servers straightened, unknowing. The bartender adjusted his stance, unbidden. 3 men near the kitchen subtly angled toward the back exit. It wasn't loud. It wasn't violent. It was command. And yet, the weight of it rolled across the entire restaurant like a stone dropped in water, rippling beneath the surface. My stomach lurched. He hadn't spoken. Not yet. Not aloud. But the implication was clear. The smallest shift in posture, a fractional glance, a micro-expression, enough to tell the people trained to notice that something had changed. That the game had moved to a new level. I froze. Tray pressed to chest. Heart hammering. My mouth dry. The smile was gone. Completely. Replaced by focus. Calculation. Control. And then, he lifted his glass. Slowly. Methodically. Not to drink. Not to toast. Not in the casual rhythm of dinner. He held it. Waiting. Watching. And with the smallest tilt of his head, directed at someone across the room, the first domino moved. Everything around him remained calm. The jazz played on. Glasses clinked softly. Silverware scraped plates. But underneath it all, the tension had thickened. The calm was false. And we were all trapped beneath it. I knew then, whatever came next, I would be pulled in whether I wanted to be or not. And in that instant, before he even spoke a single word aloud, I realized. He had just changed the rules. It happened before I could blink. 1 second, the restaurant hummed with polite conversation, the soft scrape of silver against porcelain, the muted clink of glasses. The next, darkness swallowed everything. Lights out. Absolute. Instant. Complete. The jazz quartet froze mid-note. Crystal glasses rattled on tables as if mocking the silence. A woman screamed, short, sharp, panicked. And then, movement. Bodies dropped. Furniture toppled. A collision of sound, glass, and panic. I froze. Not because I wanted to. Because my brain refused to process it all at once. Kong Min-jun was moving. Not frantic. Not chaotic. Every step precise. Controlled. Lethal. I saw the first attacker before anyone else did. A man lunged from the kitchen doorway, knife glinting under the emergency red light. Jun's hand was already on his wrist. Twist. Snap. The knife clattered to the floor. He spun. Elbow drove into the second man's throat. Both attackers crumpled to the ground. 3 more appeared, kitchen staff or hidden assassins camouflaged in white. My chest constricted. I wanted to scream. To duck. To melt into the floor. I grabbed the nearest object. A tray. A wine bottle. Anything. And then I realized, I was in the blast radius. I was too close. Too exposed. I hurled a pan of hot oil from the range. It hit one man squarely across the chest and face. His scream was animal, inhuman, primal. I staggered backward as the heat brushed my arm, my stomach lurching. Jun's hand found my back. Firm. Guiding. Propelling me forward through chaos like I was weightless. blood streaked across the white marble floors. Red and copper and silver glass fragments. I could see the fear. Not in him. In the attackers. He moved faster than physics should allow. Every strike, every movement, deliberate. Efficient. Deadly. Through the smoke, red light, and chaos, I realized something else, something terrifying. He understood everything. The whisper. The positioning. The plan. Every fragment I had overheard. He hadn't just noticed. He had anticipated. Calculated. Already adapted. My hands shook. My legs burned. But adrenaline carved a path of clarity through panic. We burst through another set of doors into storage. Grain sacks, flour bags, stacked so high the emergency light barely penetrated. Voices chased us, shouting in Italian. Steps pounding, closer, methodical. I pressed against him. His chest against mine. Heart steady. Mind sharper than any blade I'd ever seen. How many? I whispered, breath fogging in the dim red light. Too many, he murmured, almost a purr. Lips brushing the top of my head. Calm. 3 men entered the storage, shadows grotesque across the walls. Weapons drawn. Silent. Deadly. Professional. And then it hit me. This wasn't just a hit. Not a personal feud. Not a casual assassination. This was occupation. Precision. A strike coordinated beyond what any civilian could imagine. I swallowed. Heart still hammering. Mind racing. And in that instant, adrenaline sharpened fear into clarity. We were trapped in a war disguised as a restaurant, and I had just stepped onto the battlefield. There was no turning back. No safety. And the worst part, I knew the whisper had saved him, but it had also marked me. Targets don't disappear quietly. They multiply. The noise subsided. Or maybe I just stopped noticing it. Glass lay scattered across marble floors, reflecting red emergency lights like shards of fire. Silverware jutted from overturned chairs. The faint smell of scorched oil and blood lingered in the air, sharp and metallic. Kong Min-jun stood near the far wall, sleeves rolled back, breath steady, eyes scanning the room as if nothing had happened. His suit was torn, streaked with something dark I didn't want to identify. But his posture, commanding, measured, remained perfect. I pressed my palms against my thighs, trying to steady shaking hands. Tried to remember the last time I'd felt a heartbeat so loud, so violent in my chest. Tried to remember the last time I had stared death in the face and survived. He looked at me. Really looked at me. The kind of look that sees everything, even what you think you've hidden. Recognition. Calculation. A fraction of respect. And something else, a mark. I had stepped into a world I wasn't meant to touch. And now, he knew it. Carolina sat at table 1 again, glass in hand, expression carefully blank, but the tension in her shoulders betrayed her. She had lost control of the moment, even if she pretended otherwise. No one else in the room realized the balance had shifted. Servers adjusted trays, patrons murmured quietly, oblivious to the battlefield that had unfolded mere feet away. I swallowed. Tried to exhale. My hands still trembled. I was alive. But I was not safe. Not truly. Jen's gaze lingered on me, steady, calculating. Silent communication passed without words. A warning, a promise, a threat, I couldn't tell which. The rest of the attackers had retreated or been incapacitated. The chaos had been contained. But the room itself felt different now. Heavy. Charged. Waiting for the next spark. I understood something crucial. I had saved him. But in doing so, I had become part of the game. And in the world he moved through, being seen once meant you were remembered. Doors opened and closed quietly in the restaurant, steps echoing faintly. Someone was coming. Or going. Or watching. I shifted my tray, pretending to check on orders. My heart still hammered, mind still racing. The 4 words I had whispered, they had altered reality in ways I couldn't yet measure. I would carry this mark with me. Every decision from this point on would be weighed against it. I stepped back into the flow of the restaurant. Patrons smiled, servers moved, the jazz resumed. Normal. Calm. Controlled. But I wasn't normal. And I knew this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Outside, the city lights blinked, indifferent to the war that had just passed beneath them. Inside, power had shifted. Rules had changed. And somewhere, in the quiet spaces between action and observation, I realized. This night had ended, yes. But the story had only just begun.